Mastrofrancesco. Rob is the senator from Wolcott, Gale, the state representative from Wolcott. Maybe you guys can respond to that, because this is in the news right now. It's a big thing right now.
Right. Well, it's amazing to me that people, what do they think we're up to? Do they think we're drawing the attention to these bills for some nefarious purpose? I mean, what exact benefit would I have to say that the
well, you could just be misinformed, which is his opinion. You don't know what you're talking about.
It's dangerous now. Misinformation.
Well, I have served for the last 10 years on the Government Administration and Elections Committee in the state legislature and heard thousands of hours worth of testimony and read hundreds and hundreds of bills on the subject of elections, dealt with registrars of voters, town clerks, and dealt with numerous campaigns over the years, as well as documented countless cases of actual election fraud, which I have brought to the floor of the state Senate and documented repeatedly.
What type of legitimate voter fraud is going on? You know, actual people getting busted for playing games to rig elections. Can you share some of those stories with us, or the techniques that are used?
Well, I'll bring one relevant story that any of your listeners can look up very, very quickly, and that was a landlord, I believe, in Bridgeport, and this is even pre-2020, before we're doing the mass mailing, back when you had to actually go and solicit your own absentee ballot application.
So you had to show up. And
you had to request your own. Well, you had a landlord in Bridgeport request the ballot applications for all of the tenants of his building on their behalf, and then intercepted those ballot applications, sent them in. When the ballots came,
well, he filled them out.
That's
on
correct.
behalf of his tenants, without them even knowing.
And it's a two-step process. You have to request the ballot application. In his case, nowadays they're going to mail it to you, but he had to request the ballot applications. The ballot applications had to be mailed to those people. He intercepted them, completed the ballot applications, sent them back, and then intercepted the actual ballots when they came, completed them, and sent them in. He was recently convicted.
Now, how many units are we talking about?
I don't remember.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It sounded like there was 5 or 6 units.
And what was his motive?
I believe he was a candidate for public office himself in the town.
So there is a good example of the lengths people will go just for themselves to do a little cheating. Like, think about the crime you're committing for 4 or 5 votes, and it shows how when people are in pursuit of power and they want to win, then they break rules and stretch rules. And imagine when they start getting other people to do that. Or imagine when the political party that knows there are more registered voters that belong to it figures out that it can just send everybody a ballot application, even if they haven't voted in the last 530 years.
Right, and there's been no effort to clean up the voter rolls. They know that thousands and thousands and thousands of ballot applications were returned in the mail. Clearly, they were not sent to the right people. They should be removing those names, and yet they're going to be remailed this time, and there's going to be very little effort done to police the situation. And the problem with this type of fraud is that there's no way to catch the criminals. There really isn't.
Because you've taken the chain of custody of the ballots away from the people who monitor them traditionally.
Right. We have literally hundreds of pieces of testimony that have come to our committee from people telling us that they have received absentee ballot applications that don't belong to them, sometimes 5, 6 of them, some of them, for their kids that have moved away, some for their dead relatives, some for their cat and their dog. And I firmly believe, and I hate to have this opinion of my fellow citizens, but the documentation is there on fightvoterfraud.org. You can follow what they're investigating all the time. People are actually filling out these ballots and sending them in on behalf of other people, and that's a process that needs to be stopped. People need to have confidence in our elections, because if we don't have confidence, if we cannot agree that the election is legitimate, we are in grave danger of losing our republic.
Gale?
And I would just add on that we hear this often where people say that the elections are very smooth here in Connecticut and there's no problem. And I would say prove it. So there's plenty of proof that there's a lot of irregularities with the absentee ballots. The hundreds of thousands that came back just on the applications that were sent out proves that the voter rolls are wrong. We've received dozens of phone calls from people saying that they've gotten duplicate ballots. Their the parents were passed away and they received ballot applications from them. So for those who think that it's smoothly, I would say prove it, because we have plenty of proof that it's not.
Let me try explaining from their point of view, because my own personal experience is you go to vote, you give them your name, they have your name, they check you off, and you vote. Smooth. Whatever might be going on that's nefarious or incompetent or has a pattern of behavior that would create holes isn't apparent to me as a regular voter who's lived in the same home for a long time, right? If you're in the city and you work on a campaign, in city campaigns, this kind of stuff is routine from what I can tell,
right,
where there's ballot harvesting going on, where there are people who know the people living in a project, say, with hundreds of apartments, and they walk through and they go to people who don't want to vote and say, I've got a ballot all filled out for you. You want to sign it? And they give them a gift in exchange for it. I hear these stories all the time from the political people involved with those activities.
And I would add that if we had signature verification, photo ID for voting, and more security measures in place, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation today, because we would have measures in place to protect the integrity of our elections. But we don't have signature verification. We don't have photo ID.
Right.
You know, most people go in, they say that when I go to vote, I'm asked for an ID, but it's really not required. And
it's technically required, right?
No.
Aren't you required to?
No.
It says that on websites, though, of the...
You can walk in there, and without a driver's license, you can hand them a utility bill, and if you don't have that, you can just pretty much fill out an affidavit.
Do an affidavit.
Right.
Yes, but that's the requirement.
But the problem is that there's no signature on file to verify that you are the person who you are.
So it's
when
a broken process.
Exactly.
It's worse than that, actually, because if you go in and you vote on Election Day and you cannot prove your identity, and which, as was pointed out, you do not need a photo ID. You can use anything or nothing, and you fill out an affidavit. There is no auditing process. What happens is they register you to vote, and then they send you a voter registration card a couple months after the election, and then it gets returned in the mail. And what do we do about that? Absolutely nothing.
Now, in a responsible polity, I believe what they do is they give you a provisional ballot. If you don't have a proper ID, they take that and they put it to the side, and you have to come back within a certain amount of time with a proper ID. Does that practice happen in Connecticut?
Well, we do have a provisional ballot system, and basically what it does is it limits your ballot only to federal office. But there is no requirement for you to come back. You just end up getting registered to vote, and a voter registration card is sent to you. But if that voter registration card bounces in the mail and comes back, there is no mechanism to actually pull that vote or know how that person voted or know who they ever were.
Right.
There are countless other problems. The drop boxes. You're going to send out absentee ballot applications and then ballots to people, and then they're supposed to fill them out and return them to a drop box. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that happened in the last session is I made a big deal out of a photograph that was sent to me showing a drop box with ballots hanging out of it. I'm like, this is a problem with security. And I got to tell you, the Democrats came back, and they were so proud when they were able to prove to me that that photo was taken the day after Election Day. And I'm like, well, isn't that also a problem? Because now
Why
you
is
have
that exciting?
Yes, exactly. It shows
they
that
should have been counted already.
That's correct. They should have either been counted or, those people were disenfranchised because they thought their ballot was going to count. And obviously it did not. So there are problems of fraud, but there's problems just from the process no matter what. And the best solution is really to have one-day in-person voting, to stick to protocols that require a legitimate reason for an absentee ballot, and to prohibit the unsolicited mailing of ballot applications to anyone. I want to expand voting as much as possible, but I believe that if you want to vote, you can go online or make the phone call or stop by the town clerk's office and pick up your absentee ballot yourself. They should not be mailed willy-nilly by any person.
And by the way, the question is, what is the motive for the Democrats to play all these games, to try to get early voting and absentee voting that lasts for weeks before an election? Why do they want that? Why do they want you to be able to walk in without showing an ID? Why is that so important to them? And why do they insult minority voters by suggesting that they're not capable of producing an ID, that they don't have them, and that they can't show them? Why do they fight tooth and nail? You're talking about them wanting to violate the law with a new law that they know violates the state constitution for the purpose of rigging elections. There's no other explanation for desiring these nefarious things other than to get a nefarious result. We're talking to Rob Sampson and Gale Mastrofrancesco, both are representatives of the people of Wolcott. Rob is a state senator, so he hits some other towns as well. What are those again?
I represent the towns of Wolcott, Southington, Prospect, Cheshire, and Waterbury.
And do you get outside of Wolcott?
Yes, Wolcott and part of Southington.
Okay. We will talk more with these two as we continue. We're going to take a quick break, but I'm glad we got a little emotional there. We took that call off the air, and the guy was so unwilling to accept the obvious that he got me a little charged up. 860-522-9842, the rant line number, 860-751-4698. More coming your way on WTIC.
Show live from the
Is it coming? What's going on? Are you guys full-time yet for this session?
I don't think the job is ever part-time.
Yeah, but I mean, for right now, you're in session officially, right?
We're in session until I think it's May 5th or 6th, or first week in May we're there till.
Yeah, so it goes by quick on the short year, right?
It goes by very quick. You're in public hearings during the day. You have committee meetings, and then every once in a while they'll call a session, so it's pretty busy.
And tomorrow the hearing is what again?
10 a.m. 10 a.m. tomorrow.
But what is it? Tell people.
Oh, it's for Government Administration Elections Committee public hearing to have people speak out on using COVID as an excuse to vote through the November election.
Mm-hmm. And what type of people do you anticipate? Do you know who's going to come? Do people sign up for this, or is it just show up? How's that work?
You have to sign up. Today was the deadline at 3 o'clock to sign up to speak.
Oh, now you tell me.
I'm sorry, to speak, but but we did do I'd say a podcast or a Zoom last night to get the word out. We did do email blasts, so hopefully quite a few people got the message and they signed up today before 3 o'clock to testify. They can still submit a testimony to the GAE committee, and the email address is...
It's GAE testimony at cga.ct.gov.
There you go.
Wow, is that easy to remember?
It's as long as my last name.
Yes.
So that's why I said you take it.
That's great. What a great address. We'll give it out again. Maybe people can record it and play it back slow so they can understand what you just said.
It's not that hard, honestly. All of the emails at the state capitol basically end in at CGA, which is Connecticut General Assembly.ct for Connecticut.gov. And that one happens to be, and you can reach Gale or I just by putting our names ahead of that, rob.sampson at cga.ct.gov. And this is GAE, Government Administration and Elections Testimony. And if you email there basically saying that you oppose the bills that allow for COVID and the mass mailing of ballots, it would be very beneficial. Usually when we have these public hearings, it's sad to say, the Democrats, they have advanced knowledge. They're setting the agenda. The chairs of the committee knew these bills were going to be up for a hearing weeks ago because they're the ones deciding when it happens.
But you don't know.
But we find out when the statutorily required notice is posted, and then, of course, we've got to get that message out to people on our side of the issue. And, of course, the average people are working, and it's difficult to take time off or even to put together testimony. These bills are complex on purpose. One of them is 30-something pages long, even though it has a pretty simple result. But they do that on purpose because they want to make it difficult for the average person to be able to understand what's going on.
Including people voting on those pieces of legislation? Are they trying to do that to state representatives and senators to confuse them?
Well, there's no doubt that the average legislator is not reading every word of every bill. And as a matter of course, a lot of things slip through the cracks. And that's unfortunate. And it's the responsibility of the ranking members, Gale and I, on this particular committee to make sure that we are fully informed and that we are sharing that information with our colleagues. And I think we do a good job of it. But
well, wait a second. If you get sandbagged by the Democrats and you don't get to see the 30-page bill until 10 minutes before you consider it or whatever the time frame is, then you don't really have enough time. How do you do it?
Well, you get very good at being able to figure it out in seconds.
You know the code.
Oh, yes, or you forgive me for using French, but you beat the crap out of them right there in the committee for bringing this thing to you at the last minute, and you challenge them to explain what it is, and you go paragraph by paragraph, and you do it right there in front of the world, and you embarrass them. But this is a common practice of theirs. I mean, listeners should really understand that a lopsided legislative body is a very dangerous thing. And in Connecticut, where you have both chambers have basically 2-to-1 margins, Democrat to Republican, and they have the governor, they control everything. And by virtue of that, only their bills are heard. You know, I submit bills every year. Gale submits bills every year. I put like 130 bills in this year, and I think I'll get hearings on 3 or 4 of them. Mm-hmm. The Democrats, they get to control the agenda. They decide what happens. They also decide when it happens. So we can't get our bills heard. The only options we have are to be strong debaters and to offer amendments. And they use every procedural trick in the book also to prevent us from even being able to offer our amendments.
So not a lot of nobility from the party of compassion and love, huh?
Yeah, and the sad part about that really is that they have no reason to be open and honest. They're going to win the vote anyway, but yet they still resort to these tactics. It's embarrassing on their behalf, if you ask me.
We've got 2 minutes left. What else do you want to tell us, Gale?
Well, just real quick. So after the public hearing tomorrow, the next step would be it has to go back to it'll go into our committee, and the committee will debate it, and they will vote on it. So it's not secure yet. The committee has to vote on it, and then it would go to the House for a vote and the Senate for a vote, and they has to pass both chambers before that takes effect.
Okay. But these days that happens pretty easily a lot of the time, right?
Well, we're here, and we were on Zoom last night, all for the express purpose of using the public pressure to force the Democrats' hand to change course. And we've done it. We did it successfully on tolls. We did it successfully on the mask mandate. And I believe we can fix our election as well if we have the people's support in Connecticut holding Democrats accountable.
Are there any other pieces of legislation that you know of through any committee or, just that are coming that are going to cause an emotional reaction, perhaps, like the ones you just alluded to?
Well, the governor's got a big gun control proposal, which I think will be very dangerous if it was enacted. I know that they're debating aid in dying. I think that's going to be voted on in the Public Health Committee tomorrow. And, of course, there's going to be revisions to the budget. And one of the big things that's going to happen is that they're going to be figuring out throughout this session how to spend the mountains of federal money that have come our way. And you just know they're not going to do it with any sort of honesty or, decent purpose. It's going to be used to create a larger vote rigging scheme.
Yes. All right. That's a nice end to the conversation. Rob Sampson, state senator from Wolcott. Gale Mastrofrancesco, state representative from Wolcott. You guys have websites or Facebook pages you want to push people to?
You can just look us up on Facebook, and my name is Gale Mastrofrancesco. If you can say that 3 times and spell it, you're a genius.
No, you don't have to apologize for that name. It's got character.
But if you actually go to the CGA website, there's a House member list. You can look our names and click our websites right there. It's probably the easiest way to find it.
So you go to the main page for
CGA.
For the House of Representatives or for the whole assembly?
For the whole assembly.
Okay.
And there's a list there of our senators, our representatives, and you can certainly click it on and go right to their page.
Rob?
Yeah, SenatorSampson.com is my official website from the state, and I also have a campaign website, Sampson4CT.com. And Facebook is the best way to reach either one of us, really, because that's where we're posting every day the updates of what's going on.
Thank you guys for being here. Nice to talk with you.